Hi everyone, welcome back to our podcast. Today we are going to talk about the buying process and everything that's involved. We're also going to try and answer a lot of questions that you've sent in and some that we got from previous podcasts. Marianne's going to help us facilitate that. So we're just going to start off today talking about this process from start to finish. So probably the biggest, most important thing to begin with, obviously, is to choose a real estate professional that you're comfortable working with and that's going to have your best interests at heart.
I think also before we go to the real estate agent, I think you have to look at is what's not working with where you are now, because there's always a need that comes up before you get to a real estate agent.
Yeah.
So is it too small? Are you trying to get on the real estate ladder? Are you trying to move for schools? Are you trying to move closer to work, closer to transit? Like really find out what's not working, because before you meet with a real estate agent, you got to know what are you looking for, because this is not just a place to live. It's actually, a home.
Yes, and you should have all those answers top of mind, because when you do find a good professional, they will want to do what we always do, a buyer consultation with all of our new buyers, where we just sort of sit down and we find out all those things from the buyer. We find out, like Jeff said, where are you living now? What's not working about where you're living now? What are we hoping to achieve? What's important? What are must-haves? What are nice-to-haves? All those kinds of things before we start the search. We try to gather a lot of information and find out exactly what you're looking for. We do also go through the buying process and what's going to be required, which we're going to discuss in this podcast, but we do go through that in a buyer's consultation with our buyers too beforehand, so that they really know upfront what's coming up next.
Yeah, and again, most people start looking for houses about 6 months online, which I think online is a great tool. You start seeing things. Every year things are getting better, especially with the initiative with AI is really starting to explode a lot of different things. But again, most people start on the internet, then they kind of stumble onto an agent, either from a referral, from an open house or something.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure that you're picking somebody that's going to ask you the questions that are really going to get deeper in why you're trying to do a home. Like when we bought our first home, it was more for what we could afford and the nicest area we could afford.
And the second home, you're looking for
All about schools.
specifics that are must-haves. Yeah.
So once you have a real estate agent, what would you say the next biggest step in the process is?
I would say that the next biggest step would be a pre-approval. It's important to have a mortgage lender that you are comfortable with and meet with them. And just more than anything, it's not how much money you can get, because very often the banks, the lenders will lend you more than you're comfortable with. But it's more finding out what payment you're comfortable with and working that into a budget.
Yeah.
So it just helps to have somebody. We can recommend great mortgage brokers. Or you may have one yourself, but that's a good first step, because we need to have a good understanding of your comfort level with your payments before we can kind of come up with a general budget and start looking, so that we can make sure we keep you within that budget.
And I think a lot of people get afraid of going to a mortgage broker. There seems to always be a lot of resistance from buyers to get
commitment.
And the thing is, it shouldn't ever be a fear, because if they've pre-approved you for $1 million and you want to spend $900, that's fine. You don't have to spend what you're pre-approved for. But the biggest thing with pre-approval, besides even knowing what you can afford, is, especially in the rates right now, is locking down a rate. We're recommending a lot of people right now go to a 1 or 2 year fixed rate, because the anticipation is in the next couple of years interest rates will come down. And again, people get caught up in interest rates right now. And you gotta marry the house and date the rate. So the rate you can change at some point in the future.
Yeah, and it's also important, I think, from the other side of the table's perspective. Like when I have a listing and the buyer's agent is presenting an offer to me, even though financing conditions are common again now, but I still like to ask questions as to has this person been pre-approved. Get a little bit of an understanding that they have. So it presents a stronger offer for you as well, if you can say, that you've at least gone through the pre-approval process.
And again, like I was mentioning earlier, internet's a great tool, great things, but again, what your pre-approval online is, what the rate is online,
Yeah.
is usually not the same. It's either too low or too high. It's never usually the exact rate. And number two is the interest rate they fill in. You don't know what the current rates are. There's a posted rate and then there's a discounted rate. You work with a mortgage broker, you always get the discounted rate. You work with a bank, they give you maybe half of the discounted rate unless somebody else gives you something better and they match.
Contact with the
Yeah,
bank.
exactly.
So what is the pre-approval process like? What do mortgage lenders usually need from the buyer?
Mortgage lenders are going to need obviously your proof of income, probably your last few NOAs, T4s, that kind of thing, just to see your income. Then they're obviously going to want to know all your other financial liabilities or commitments, so they can factor that in because they work on a gross debt ratio that you can have. Then they'll also want to know how much down payment you plan on having, where that's coming from. They'll pull obviously a credit report, the things that you would expect. But you're going to need to provide some type of proof of income.
Yeah, pay stubs are usually, you need a letter from your employer that you're saying that you're currently employed, and then they'll work out the different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we were both self-employed when we bought our place. There's more hoops to kind of jump. It's more tricky. But again, we did it. Like
A good mortgage broker.
A good mortgage broker, because there's so many people that are self-employed now. The gig economy. Look at Uber drivers. They got part-time income. They got full-time income. There's all kinds of different ways that comes through.
Yes.
Once you've narrowed down your search with an agent and met with a mortgage broker to find out how much you can afford, what's the next step?
This is the fun part.
Yes. Everybody loves this part. So once you've figured out, we've figured out what you're looking for, how much is a comfortable budget for you, and we've got that pretty much pre-approved from a reputable lender, then we get the fun part of going out and looking. So that's obviously the step that everyone would prefer to jump to, but we do get to that step at this point, and that's when we start going out and we look at homes. And I think there's really no right or wrong choice. I mean, it's up to the individual. It's whatever they feel is the right home for them. We try not to put our own. We obviously give advice if we see something. We're very definitely going to let them know. This could be a problem, or it is facing a school. Are you okay with that? It's going to be
We
very
talk about a lot
quiet in the
about-
summer, but at 9
resale.
and 3, it's going to be busy. Those kinds of things. We point things out.
I think
as
the
we go
biggest
along.
mistake, though, when we talk about going out, and again, it's the most exciting part, but there's a resistance to seeing lots of homes. They feel they don't want to waste their time.
Yeah.
They want to do an open house. They want to do things. And to me, I think the more houses you see, the better it is.
sure.
Because then you get better perspective
Yeah.
of what's going on.
And
if
we
you
get
see-
a better sense.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Yeah.
What that's why we always rate a house. Out of 10, what do you rate this house?
Mhm.
Because then we start getting a feel for what you
Yeah.
want, and then do pros and cons on something that you decide you want.
Mhm.
And then, the worst thing for me is that I show somebody 3 houses and they want to buy one, and I'm thinking, we haven't really seen a lot of houses,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to do a good service to
Yeah.
yourself.
It's true.
And I think that going to open houses is fantastic. But the problem is with open houses is that the agent's got fiduciary duties to get the highest price for the seller. So from a buyer's perspective, you're not getting the full, they
Yeah.
might not point out the furnace is beyond life expectancy. The roof needs to be
You're
done
better
next
off to
year.
see it with your
Exactly.
own-
And then we
your own
can,
agent.
and the other thing I think when you're going through houses, whether you're with an agent or an open house, you should never talk about how much you love a house, because I assume, and I tell all buyers, you're being recorded, or assume
Especially
you're being
now with
recorded.
Ring doorbells.
There's all kinds of things. So
all kinds of
you should
things.
never, say, wow, this is my dream home, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden the seller hears that through their various devices, and then you've lost all your perspective
True.
of negotiating.
That's true.
All right, so once I found the right home, what's the next step?
So once we found the right home and you're excited about it, what we like to do is provide you with some data as far as comparable sales in the area, so that we can together come up with a strategy and a price point that we think is fair for the home. So we do that by, like I said, coming up with some comparable sales. We sit down, we walk you through them, and like I said, together we just sort of come up with, this is where we think the range of value is for us anyway. and then we position a strategy on where to start.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. Is that a lot of people, if we know a property, and one of our agents was working on something, the property's been on the market for 180 days. Seller or buyers tend to have hesitation about going in lower than a certain comfort zone. They'll say, well, we'll wait until it comes down. No, I think you should be going in at market value and going in. Yes, it might be low, but if the house has been on the market 180 days, there's only a couple of reasons why. Most likely it's overpriced.
Yeah.
Or number two, the seller's not that motivated. They don't have to sell. They're testing the market, and they're still hung up onto last January.
That's really
February,
the
March
first step.
prices.
The first step is we determine whether we think the house is priced well. Sometimes they are, and that's great. From there, once we've decided what our offering price is going to be, then we prepare an offer. It has all the clauses that are required to protect the buyer. We definitely, in most cases, unless the market we just came out of, we had less opportunity to put these conditions in, but they're back now. So we've got financing conditions, which is usually 5 business days. Even though you've been pre-approved, it just gives that formal final sign off on the property that you're buying. So we make sure we get that. There's a home inspection condition very often, in which case we take in a qualified home inspector and just have the major mechanics checked, the roof, the foundation, all those kinds of things. If it's a condominium, we're going to check the status certificate. And then if there's any other clauses that we think are needed, for instance, if there's a swimming pool, we always put a clause in there to cover that off in the winter, especially if you're buying in the winter and we can't check to
or
make
if it's
sure
a cottage
okay.
or something, there's well water,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
septic tanks, there's those types of things.
Yeah. So we prepare the offer paperwork and submit the offer. We negotiate the terms on your behalf with the other agent, and hopefully we come to a conclusion that makes everyone happy.
What does it mean if it says that they're holding an offer date on the property?
Offer dates we saw predominantly in the last few years.
Probably 10 years.
Yeah, is when a property is brought to the market, let's say on a Monday. It's available for showing, so people can see it. It's marketed to the public, but offers are not entertained until a certain date, which is typically 7 days later. So, for instance, if we bring it out on a Monday, very often we'll say the offer date is the following Monday. So during that week of showings, there's no offers that are.
And usually the properties at market value or lower to try to get the stimulation of buyers, because again, for sellers, selling your house, having to keep it clean all the time, if you've got kids, if you've got animals and stuff, is hard. So the offer date process appealed to a lot of people. It appealed to the sellers because they have it for 1 week. They also appealed to the buyers because if they wanted to go away for a weekend and the new house came out, they were worried they'd miss out. Mm-hmm. So the offer date, even though the competition the buyers didn't love, but they love that, okay, I've got until
a little bit of time.
This time.
And I think also for sellers too, it was almost like necessary, because if we didn't have an offer date in that crazy hot market, it would literally sell on the first day and nobody would get in to see it.
Yeah, and here's the other thing is, offer dates are gone or pretty much gone, mm-hmm. and somewhat coming back.
Yeah.
Why is there multiple offers? Well, because there's multiple offers right now because there's no supply, there's massive demand. Even you can take all the stuff in the media, there's still demand. Every time, this week I think we sold 3 houses, there was competition in all of them, all because the market dictates the price. It's supply and demand. It's only worth what buyer's gonna pay and the seller's willing to sell it for.
So what happens if you have to compete in a multiple offer scenario?
First question I always ask people is the house is listed at X, and you have to ask yourself, what is it worth to you? So if it sells for, let's say it's listed for $1 million and it sells for $1.1 million and you offered $1 million, you have to be happy walking away from the price that it went for, because again, emotions are high, and that's what we as agents are there to keep.
On the same point, we make sure you're not going to go get swept up in your emotions and go crazy over either. So
because I think that you definitely have to prepare. We give you comps, we tell you what we think it's worth, But ultimately, if we say it's worth $1 million and you want to do $1.10 million because your mother lives on the street, and long term it's going to be something that's going to save you thousands of dollars every month in childcare, then then it makes sense. But ultimately, you have to decide. So you want to make sure that you're going into a multiple offer. You want to make sure you're pre-approved, because you're probably going to have to go in with no finance condition. You're probably going to want to again walk through the house with a home inspector, because you can do a pre-home inspection if you're in multiple offers. Again, multiple offers, depending on your price, they can accept some conditions, because if your price is better than everybody else, you're going to be maybe considered. But most sellers like a firm deal, because then they know their house is sold and they move on.
Yeah, I would say it's just the strategy is completely different with competing offers versus non-competing offers, because it's all about the leverage, right? So if we're a single offer and we're the only offer on the table, that's different. And we're trying to get, put all kinds of wish list things into the offer and try to negotiate our terms, whatever's better for us as much as possible. If we're competing and now the seller is the one that holds leverage because they've got 5 offers, not just ours, it's a completely different strategy, because now we're looking at, okay, how do we make our offer the most appealing to this seller? So as a buyer agent, it's very important to have a good relationship with the selling agent and ask a lot of good questions. What is your seller's preferred closing date? So we're not now working on as much what's best for us, but how do we make it best for the seller? Obviously, we have to be able to live with it, but something. So it's just sort of the strategy behind how to present the offer changes when you're competing. That's all.
And again, I think that because you again, one agent that's been around the block a few times with competing offers, because I've had offers accepted that have been lower in price than other offers. Because exactly, when they ask about the pre-approval and you have confidence to say these people are pre-approved, other people say, well, they're kind of pre-approved. They're kind of I don't know. It doesn't give the agent, if we're accepting an offer, it doesn't give me a lot of confidence to take that offer if the other agent is humming and hawing.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I, as a listing agent, I like to ask questions about the buyers. What do they do for a living? If the agent doesn't know,
then how much do they know this agent? There's not a lot of confidence that this person.
How well do they know the buyer?
After you prepare the offer, what happens next?
So once the offer is prepared, then we go to work. This is where we really go to work and present the offer, negotiate the offer on the buyer's behalf. So we always try, I should say, to wherever possible. I mean, COVID has changed a lot of things, as we all know, but wherever possible, I always try to present in person if possible, because you can build a connection, you can build some rapport with the seller and the seller's agent in person a lot easier than you can by email, for instance. I mean, if I'm not able to get in front of the seller, I at least make sure I have a voice-to-voice conversation with the buyer's agent and tell them a little bit about my buyers, give them some, like Jeff was saying earlier, some reassurance that I'm very confident in their profile. This is a strong offer. If you have any concerns about any of the terms of the offer, let me know. Let's talk about it. So it's important, if we don't get face-to-face, that we at least have a verbal voice-to-voice conversation.
And also this is where the negotiation comes back. In a normal case, let's say you're $50,000 under list price, you're negotiating back and forth. It could take a few tries. It could also take a couple of days, especially in the market that's going on now. Again, we're seeing that less and less. We're seeing more and more multiple offers coming back again, but that's where it takes time.
Yes, so that's basically it. The offer gets submitted. One of 3 things happen. Either can get rejected outright, which doesn't usually happen. It can be accepted by the seller, which case is great, or 9 times out of 10, especially when it's the initial offer, it gets counter-offered. So the seller will change some terms, usually the price very often, but not just that, sometimes the closing date, maybe any of the inclusions that they don't want to include, some of the clauses or conditions that we've put in that they're not comfortable with. And then it comes back to us. Then we sit down again with our buyers, review the counter offer, and build our strategy from there. Okay, they've come down this much. At this stage, where do we want to take it to? Where do we want to go next? Do we want to give some concessions to get other concessions, that kind of thing. So we sort of go back and forth. Yeah, we negotiate back and forth until one of the parties gets to a point where they're like, that works for me. Okay, and we hopefully have a deal.
And what happens once your offer is accepted?
Once the offer is accepted, we have a little celebration, and then the deposit's due. So whatever the deposit was in the offer, it is due within 24 hours of acceptance. So if we accept the offer at 8:10 p.m. tonight, that's all great. We have until 8:10 p.m. tomorrow to get the deposit delivered to the listing agent's office.
Certified funds, like
yes.
bank
So
transfer,
that can be done by
or
direct bank deposit, wire transfer, money, bank draft or money order. It has to be negotiable funds. So we take care of that, help in that regard, and deliver it to the listing agent's office within that time period. And then the date of acceptance of the offer, so if we accepted it, like I said in this example, at 8:10 that night, the first day of the conditions starts the next day. So if we had a 5 business day financing condition, the next day would be considered our first day.
And weekends and
as long as it's
holidays.
not a weekend,
Weekends and holidays.
so then we would start obviously firing it off to the mortgage broker, book the home inspection, do all the due diligence things that we have to do within that conditional period, and make sure we're satisfied before we move forward.
So once you've satisfied the conditions, what does that mean?
So once we've, whatever the conditions are, if it's financing and home inspection, for example, then we get word from the mortgage broker that we're good to go. Then we have to sign what's called a notice of fulfillment. That is a 1-page document that we have to sign within that conditional period and provide to the seller, saying that we've fulfilled our conditions. Once we fulfill all our conditions, then we have what's called a firm offer, and it is a binding agreement between both parties, and it's a done deal.
And then we go, high five, you've got a firm closing date.
Yep.
So then you get excited. You know you're moving in, let's say May 1st or whatever it is. And then the next thing that happens, you have usually 2 visits back.
Mm-hmm.
We always tell people to leave a visit for the last couple of days so you can go in and check appliances, just check that if they've agreed to,
Sure,
there's debris or anything that's out. And again, 99.9% of times we never have issues with this. Like some people will say, oh, we got to make sure the seller, everyone's decent people. Most people are just decent people. And if there's a couple of things that are there, we'll just tell the agent, oh, by the way, they left a box or something, get some clarification.
But it is a good idea.
It's a great idea. And it's basically, it says they take measurements. Basically, you just want to visit the house, get excited again,
you can. Sometimes
bring your
if you have
parents or
work to
something.
do, and sometimes people will bring a contractor.
Contractor,
if they want
that's
to get
true.
a quote going or something like that. But yeah, for the most part, it's just to see it again and make some furniture plans and that kind of thing. The last visit is more for that as well, but also to check to make sure everything is good. There's no new holes in the wall that weren't there before. Or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any additional information I have to give to my realtor once the offer is accepted?
Yes. So when the offer is accepted, we need a few things. Actually, this is ahead of the offer, but you're going to have to provide photo identification to your agent. That should be before the offer, which is basically for FinTrack. It's government
This is basically,
regulation.
it's to prove that you are who you are.
Yes.
For money laundering purposes.
Right,
Is basically what it is
exactly.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, so you do have to provide that. When you give the deposit, another government regulation is that you have to provide the account number from which the deposit funds were withdrawn, because we have to submit that to the government as well, which again is the same thing.
It's
just
money laundering.
yeah.
And some people have some resistance around that. It's not us agents, it's just a government requirement
it's
because
not
of money
us.
laundering. So obviously some bad people were doing some bad things, and hence why they bring in this
It's all
policy.
to protect the consumer. It's
Yeah,
all of it.
exactly.
And what happens on closing day?
On closing day, it's very exciting. So really what happens behind the scenes is this is where your lawyer comes in, the real estate lawyer. So an easy explanation of what happens on closing day is the buyer's lawyer is responsible for coordinating with the mortgage lender and all that kind of stuff and getting the, well, he actually checks title first, but that's 2 weeks before closing. He'll check title and make sure it's all free and clear, so there's gonna be no holdups on closing day. On actual closing day, the funds have to get to the seller's lawyer. Once the seller's lawyer has received all the funds, that could be a combination of your deposit and your down payment and your mortgage balance. Once he's got that total balance, then he actually transfers title. So he would transfer it from the current owner's name to the new owner's name. The keys are given either in a code to the lockbox, or which is more common now. It used to be lawyer to lawyer, but since COVID, we do it a little bit more with lockboxes now, which is actually easier for everyone. They get the keys, and
it's your home. And if you buy with us, you get pizza delivered.
And use of a moving truck.
Yeah, exactly. And the moving truck. Hope you guys find this helpful. Again, if you got any more questions, because all of this is driven by consumer questions, things that we get emailed and stuff. If you have any further questions, because we'd love to give you guys the information you want, email Marianne at admin@johnson-team.com. That's admin-johnson-team.com. We look forward to seeing you on the next podcast and answering some more great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.